The discussion is all around
Good afternoon,
climate
everyone.
crisis and how we
I
can
am
really
indeed
work towards
very grateful to Council
reducing
for
our
Earth Leadership and
emissions.
Sustainability for inviting me.
So
I'll quickly
this
touch upon the
conference,
crisis around water.
while I share my screen,
So, taking
I
you
think earlier
forward,
this year
Climate
we had the
Risk Index
IPCC sixth
2020, which
assessment
was
report,
published by German Watch.
which
If you
was
can see,
published, and now
India
in
stands in
COP27,
red. That
the
means
discussion is all
we are
around
amongst the
climate
top 10
crisis and
countries which are at risk due to climate change. But many countries that you would see, even the first world countries you see, are at great risk because of climate change. So we are spewing almost about 162 million tons of man-made global warming pollution into the thin shell of atmosphere every 24 hours, as if it was an open sewer. And most of the biggest sources of greenhouse gas emissions are its vehicular emission. We have air transport, we have crop burning, which is pretty common in India, especially during this time of the year. And then we have other industrial processes which are there, the landfills, because we sort of put all our waste into the landfill. So there also it contributes to major emissions, your forest burning that is there. And then of course the thawing of the permafrost. The global surface temperature departure from average, if we look at, you will see that most of the departure that's happened from the average is in the last 4 decades. Of course, the post-industrial revolution, the change started to happen, but the process hastened in the last 4 decades, and actually we are nearing 1.5 degree Celsius pre-industrial era. And 19 of the 20 hottest years on record have occurred since the year 2002 and 2020. And if you look at this, the last 7 years perhaps have been the hottest of all. On June 6, 2021, you can see how the entire planet had turned red. That means most of them were actually experiencing close to 50 degrees Celsius of temperature. And in Iran, Kuwait, Oman, and UAE, it actually exceeded 50 degrees Celsius. If this heat that we are talking about, most of it, that's almost about 93% of the extra heat is trapped by the man-made global warming pollution into the ocean, and hence we are also experiencing sea level rise, and especially the coastal areas are highly vulnerable to sea to submergence as well as to cyclones. Global ocean heat content, again, if you look at, you will see that in the same time as the temperature was rising, the global ocean heat content was also rising, and half of this increase has occurred in the last 20 years. We are all witness to the Mumbai flood that happened in 2019 and subsequently where 80 people were killed, and the Kerala flood, which again happened in 2018. Then there was a flood in Mumbai also in 2021. So the pictures actually tell us a very gripping story. The West Bengal had a cyclone Taukte, which ravaged uh, the Western India, and cyclone, yeah, sorry. So the cyclone Taukte actually ravaged the Western India, but cyclone Yas forced the evacuation, which uh, which was there in the eastern coast, forced the evacuation of 1.1 million people in the neighboring Bangladesh. The Amphan supercyclone, while we were really fighting the COVID, the most critical period, and we were battling that, we also were hit by cyclone Amphan, which almost destroyed 75 to 80% of the Sundarbans area. This is another flooding, where more than 180 people died in flooding and landslides in Maharashtra. So in Bihar as well, we had the 2020 monsoon rainfall. It was 50% higher than the normal, and it was one of the deadliest climate disaster with more than 1,900 deaths. So what we are also I'm trying to convey through these pictures is that the manifestation of climate change is best depicted by the water cycle or the hydrological cycle, and it's actually leading to the intensification of the hydrological cycle, and hence we are experiencing extreme weather events. The same extra heat that evaporates more water from the ocean, causing bigger downpours and floods, it also pulls out moisture even more quickly from the soil, and it causes longer and deeper droughts. So, Chennai, for instance, in 2015, it was fighting floods, and within a span of 4 years, we had a severe drought in Chennai to the extent that people had to stand in queue. The drought, which is being experienced in several parts of the country, has also led to failure of crops and has have pushed farmers into penury and debt, and hence almost about 60,000 farmers have committed suicide in the last 5 years. So this is another picture of drought which was there in Chennai, and people had to actually stand in queue to collect water. So as temperature rises, so does the water use. So people drink more water, so the requirement for water is increasing. The crops, of course, require more water, energy production. You have to produce more energy, and hence you need more water. The industrial processes require more water, and of course, the animals as well. So the overall requirement for water goes up. So water scarcity already affects more than 40% of the world's population, and it's going to actually also it's actually an issue of food security. It's also going to yield a decline for each 1 degree warming. The corn production, wheat production, rice, soy, everything is going to sort of decline if we are experiencing a rise in temperatures. India, amongst other countries, is considered to be one of the Earth's uninhabitable zones by 2070. The World Resources Institute, this map released by them a few years ago, already shows that 54% of India faces high to extremely high water stress, especially the region which is considered to be the breadbasket of India, and also the regions perhaps who had benefited a lot from the Green Revolution. So, what can possibly be done under such a situation? So, I would say that India is urbanizing very fast, and almost about 37% of the population today lives in urban areas. And this figure is going to rise to almost 50% by 2050. And urbanization also leads to greater concretization and more creation of impervious layer. But we need to be a little more sensible and see how we can really improve the green cover or the blue-green cover also, I would say. For instance, if you have a green cover, then most of the rain that falls probably, either goes into shallow, 25% like goes into shallow infiltration, and another 25% into deep infiltration, and there is very little runoff, and of course 40% here you have as evapotranspiration. But if when you have a concrete structure, almost 55% of the precipitation that is there goes in runoff, and there is only about 15% that is infiltrated. So it's a no-brainer that we should actually promote as much green spaces. India has had a very rich traditional water management system in the past, and the rainwater harvesting system. What is required is just revival of the existing system and replication of these, because they have stood the test of time and have been successful in water storage. I think the Jal Shakti Abhiyan, which started in 2019 by the National Water Mission under the Ministry of Jal Shakti, one of the components or one of the pillars of that is also revival of the traditional water harvesting system, amongst others, which talk about creating rainwater harvesting structures, uh, using old structures for recharging of groundwater, creating rejuvenating forests and afforestation. So rainwater harvesting, again, the policy of rainwater harvesting being mandatory for buildings in India is in existence for quite some time. In fact, Chennai had an early advantage where they had it in the early 2000. However, initially the structures worked well and the groundwater level also came up. But in due course of time, people started neglecting these structures, and due to lack of maintenance, most of the structures collapsed. Likewise, the rainwater harvesting has been sort of made mandatory for buildings with a rooftop area of roughly about 100 square meter or more in most of the cities in the country. And many a times, the builders, the real estate developers do install these rainwater harvesting structure just to get the relevant clearances. But almost about 90% of them remain non-functional. Recharge trenches is again a very, very useful way where we can use for recharging of water, not just recharging of water to the groundwater, but also for arresting the urban flooding, a phenomenon that has become very frequent in almost all cities of the country because of intensification of the water cycle. So recharge trenches again are very helpful. They can be actually made along the road. Even the areas along the road can be lowered so that most water from the road can actually move into these trenches and then can gradually percolate and help in recharging the groundwater. This is being practiced, I think, farm ponds and trenches. These are some of the pictures from Telangana, where percolation tanks and ponds and water absorption trenches and continuous contour trenches, both on the hills and the foothills, have been excavated. Here also you can see people community participation. Through that also people are constructing rainwater harvesting structures. You could also consider even recharging through abandoned wells. So well, of course, was the most popular source of water just about 5 decades ago. But with the advent of the tap water system, we have started neglecting the wells. So if we can clean our wells and we can use it for recharging of our groundwater, that's also quite useful. Even the injection well, for instance, your hand pump that is there, the bore that is there, can also be used for recharging of groundwater. Wherever you have a slope or wherever you have a creek or a stream, you can actually think of making small gabion structures or small check dams where we can slow the speed of the water, and it is retained in that area, and gradually it helps also in groundwater recharge. Rain gardens are also quite popular. It's in India, of course, we do not have many such examples, but in several countries, people are constructing rain gardens, especially in areas where the water is getting accumulated, and through the roots of the plants, not only the water gets cleaner, or it helps in purification of the water, but it also helps in gradually percolation of that water into the groundwater. Bioswales is another very, very prevalent system by which uh, you can actually arrest and filter water and recharge the groundwater. And good thing is that all these things help us prevent flooding as well. So what I wanted to say was through this presentation that it's climate change is there, it's real, it's happening. There are a lot of conferences that are happening around climate change. Climate change is definitely going to intensify the water cycle further. Uh, Cities and coastal areas in India are going to experience extreme weather events. There will be episodes of severe flooding, and even for that matter, drought in some of the regions. With 7,500 kilometers of India, the coastline of India, India is definitely vulnerable to both sea level rise and inundation on in the coastal areas, but it's also vulnerable to the uh, cyclones that are there. We are already seeing that cyclones have become more frequent and more intense, causing greater damage. So it's important that we revive our blue-green infrastructure. Of course, we have cities which have had thousands of ponds and tanks which have been silted or have been encroached upon or have been used for now disposal of solid waste, if people can come together and start cleaning up. So while the government is doing its job, it's also important that the citizens step up and they start working on reviving of their blue-green infrastructure. I'm not saying that we should not be looking at grey infrastructure, because they are also sometimes quite useful, but try to sort of strike a balance between everything. Ultimately, it's if you really want to survive through this changing climate, and if you really want to arrest the problems that are ahead of you, then I think it's if you need to really act today. Thank you very much.